Okay guys, in this episode I'm going to be showing you the timeline window here and just kind of the basic functions of the timeline window. Really the way the timeline window works here, first of all, when you open up Premiere you're going to notice that there is really no timeline. And to kind of talk about the difference between timeline and sequence, they're essentially kind of used interchangeably, the names are, but really a timeline is this area that you can drop a sequence of clips into, and that's where the word sequence comes from. So you just drop a bunch of like a sequence of clips inside and that inside of your timeline, and that creates a sequence. So essentially they are used interchangeably, but there's just some minor difference there. Down here on what I want you to know is, first of all, to create a timeline, all you have to do is grab a clip. You can just grab a clip over here and drag it into this area and drop it. And that's pretty simple, and it creates a timeline for you. I want to talk about what that does really quick. I'm going to undo that and go over here and delete it. When you create a timeline, first of all, various clips will have different settings. If you shoot on different cameras, you'll have things like a different resolution, different frame rates, different codecs, and a whole bunch of different things like that. And the timeline settings should match the general clips that you are using. You can mix settings within a timeline, but it will actually convert the footage to meet the settings of the timeline, whatever the timeline is set up as. Three major items that the timeline will be set up as here are going to be, if you select over here on a clip, you're going to see these three items: your resolution, your pixel aspect ratio here, and your frame rate. Now your timeline can share all the settings of a clip. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to do File, New. This is a new way. This is another way of creating a timeline here, or a sequence. Go up to File, New, Sequence. It's going to bring up this window and say, well, what type of timeline do you want to set? Because look at all these different types in here based on codec or video format, frame rate, resolution. There are just tons of different types of, probably hundreds of different types of timelines you could do with different settings. I usually don't use this method here where I do File, New, and create a timeline. If I do, it's because I'm trying to conform everything to one setting. If I have red footage and DSLR footage, I want to conform it to something for YouTube. I'm just going to do DSLR settings and go and select what frame rate and what codec I want, and then I'm going to edit all my video clips in that. So this is kind of rare here. What I usually do is find the general format that I'm going to be working in, and you can do a couple things. Like I showed you, you can drag it here, or you can grab this and drag it down to this little new item icon, and that'll do the same thing. When you let go of that, it will generate a new timeline. What I want you to notice here is, first of all, when you create a new timeline, it's going to name the timeline after the clip that you dragged into it, and it's going to put the clip in the timeline for you. But now if I select this movie clip, you'll notice 1920 by 1080, 1.0 pixel aspect ratio, and a frame rate, drop frame of 24 frames per second, progressive scan, 23.976. Now if I select my timeline here, notice the settings are identical. It matched the settings of the clip there. 1920 by 1080, 1.0, and 23.976. Now, usually what I do is when I generate a new timeline, I will come over here, grab this timeline here. Notice the icon. That is a timeline icon. This is media with audio and video. I'm going to grab the timeline and drag it to the left and get it out of that folder. Because oftentimes you'll end up losing track of where your timelines are located, so it's and what folder it's in. So it's good just to drag it out of these folders. Then I have all my timelines here in my project window. Important to remember. So I've got this one. I'm going to rename it. I'm going to hit Return, and brings up this little highlight. Now you can just start typing. I'm going to call this DSLR timeline. Now I'm going to go down to the red one here, and so I've got DSLR footage and red footage. Different resolutions. If I select this, notice this is nearly 4K footage. Same frame rate, same pixel aspect ratio, but different resolution. I'm going to grab a clip here and drag it and hold it over my new item icon, let go, and it generated a timeline. I'm going to move up here. I'm going to grab my timeline, drag it to the left, let go, and I pulled it out. There's my red timeline. I'm going to highlight that, press Return, and name this Red Timeline. It's important couple things that when you create those timelines, first of all, drag them out of the folders they're located in if you do this method, and then rename them so they don't have this arbitrary weird clip name. Name them so you can find them, because if you're using several different timelines, it's going to be important to organize and keep track of everything. Okay, one common thing that I'm asked quite a bit is, where did my timeline go? Sometimes people will come up here and they will accidentally hit this little button here, this little close button, and that will close a specific timeline. If you close all timelines, boom, they're all gone. And then now this is where becomes relevant. When you pulled these out of these folders, you don't have to seek them out anymore. They're right here. If you're missing a timeline, all you have to do is go over here to find your timeline icon here and double click on it like that, and it restores your timeline. Now I have both my DSLR timeline and my red timeline set. One thing that is really important to know when you're bringing footage into a shared timeline, say I'm going to be dumping DSLR footage into my red timeline. I'm going to go up to Premiere, I'm going to go to Preferences, I'm going to go to General, and if you have this thing, by default this is not checkmarked in Premiere usually. I have it pretty much always checkmarked. Whenever you import footage, I think I've mentioned this in an earlier episode, whenever you have this checkmarked and you import footage, it's going to apply that setting to all the clips that you import. If this is not checkmarked, it will not apply this. And what this does when you have it checkmarked is I have red footage here, which is 4K footage, and I have DSLR footage, which is 1920 by 1080, about half the resolution. If I grab my DSLR footage and drag it into this timeline, and I did import this with that default checkmarked, notice what it does is I drop it in here, it scales up my DSLR footage to meet the requirement, the settings of the red footage. Now watch, I'm going to uncheck this and I'm going to import some footage here. I'm going to import some DSLR footage. Let me just grab these two files right there and import those. With that unchecked, now those settings have not been applied to this to these clips that I just imported. Watch what happens when I drag it in and go over here to play the clip. Notice it plays it in its actual resolution, which is half the resolution of the red footage, 1920 by 1080 in a 4K timeline. So it's going to downscale it. And if you drag red footage that you import or 4K footage that you import into here without having that being checkmarked, then drop it into 1920 by 1080, it will do the opposite. It will zoom up on it. You can fix that, by the way, just by going to the clip and right-clicking on it and saying scale to frame size, and that makes it happen. But now any footage that I bring in from here on out, I'll probably want that checkmarked if you want it to scale automatically, and notice how that scaled it up. Okay, let's talk a little bit about playback. I'm going to grab some footage. I'm going to grab this whole folder and just stick it in here, so I've got a bunch of footage in here that we can play around with. Now first of all, this is your playhead right here in the timeline. And your playhead indicates the exact frame over here. This is clip after clip after clip. This is the beginning of the clip, this is the end of the clip. And I have all these in a sequence in here, all my raw footage in here in a sequence. Now your playhead is going to display the exact frame that the playhead is over. Whatever frame you have that over in the timeline, it's going to display the frame up here in the program monitor, which we will demonstrate in the next episode. Now, a couple ways of navigating here is you can just simply grab this playhead and move it back and forth, and this is actually called scrubbing. This is scrubbing through the footage here as we're dragging this playhead through the footage. And this will work a lot better on a faster computer. Right now I've got my recording going, so it's slowing down a little bit. But to play footage, you're simply going to hit your spacebar. Spacebar once, plays. Spacebar again, pauses. So that's simply how you play and pause. Just spacebar wants to play, spacebar wants to pause. Spacebar wants to play, spacebar wants to pause, and that's it. The JKL, as mentioned in the source window episode, is just the same inside of your timeline window. You hit J to rewind, K to stop, and L to forward. And if you hit J a few times, J, 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 it's going to speed up and go really, really fast, and it will max out. If you hit K, it will stop. L is forward. L again, it will go faster and faster and faster and faster, hitting it a bunch of times until it maxes out and goes the top speed. So that's a quick way of navigating through your timeline. Your arrows up and down to navigate as well. If you use arrow left, it will go through one frame at a time backwards. Arrow right will navigate one frame at a time forward, and you'll see your timecode update here. This is very similar to your source window, but here your timeline starts at 0 on your timecode. And as you start playing through it one frame at a time, you'll see your frames advance. Eventually you'll see your seconds advance, you'll see your minutes advance, and you'll see your hours advance. So that's your arrows left and right, and if you hold down shift while you're doing so, and if you hold down shift and do arrow back, you'll notice this jumps 5 frames at a time, and if you hold down shift and do arrow forward to the right, it'll jump forward 5 frames at a time. And that's holding down shift and using the arrows. Arrows up and down, now I'm hitting arrow up. This will go backwards in time and land on previous edits. Let's move this over here. Going to do arrow up, arrow up, arrow up, and it'll jump between the edits of whatever track is activated. We're going to talk about activated tracks versus non-activated tracks in a little bit, but these are activated right now, and these ones are not. So arrow down will jump to the right, arrow up will jump to the left. We'll go backwards, and arrow down will go forwards. A couple other little keys here is home and end. If you hit the home key, it'll go to the beginning, and we'll jump to the end of the timeline. Pretty simple. Now within the timeline here, you will notice that you have video tracks. These are stackable video tracks. You have V1, V2, V3. These are all your video tracks. And down below, you'll have your stackable audio tracks for mixing. So down here is audio, up here is video. Now the way priority works in sound here is as you drop sound down here, it's going to mix everything that's stacked together and play them all at the same time as the playhead passes through those sound clips. Video is a little bit different. You can use it for compositing. You can also use it for cutting to other items as well. I'm going to grab a clip. I'm going to drag this in here and just drop it. I'm going to move it to the track above. I'm going to just push up with my mouse a little bit and drop it right there. Notice as this clip plays through, oops, let me move it on something a little different visually here. Notice as this clip plays through here, it's going to suddenly jump up to this clip. Whatever clip is on top is going to take priority. So it's going to jump from this clip down here to this clip upon that edit. Watch this as it plays, and boom, it just played. It just jumped to that clip, and then when it gets to the end, it'll get to the end of this clip, and then we'll jump back down to this clip. So here it goes. Boom, it just jumped to the clip below it. So that's the way these stacks work with video tracks. This is mainly used for, not so much for editing as much as compositing. We'll get into that in a future episode. But that's basically the way these prioritized tracks work. Notice this track is not activated. When this is activated and you hit arrow up and down, you'll be able to land on that edit there. Hit arrow up again, it lands on this edit because these are activated. It will land on the next activated track edit point as you do arrows up and down here to land on those points. If this is not activated, it's going to ignore this clip up here, and it will jump to the next edit down here on the activated track. Okay, and oops, the reason why it landed on this is because this is activated right there, so it did land to this edit right down there. So I'm going to take that off. Now watch what happens. It completely ignored that clip now, this video in point and this audio out point, and landed on this clip because it's not activated. So now it's just going to pass right by that as if it's not there unless you activate it. And what they call this in Premiere is, this is toggle the track targeting. So they call it track targeting. It's basically activating that track for basic functionality. Down here, this is for source patching, is for editing essentially. This reads any clips that you put into the source monitor, and it uses whatever tracks you assign here to edit those, that video or audio to your timeline. Let me just show a quick example. I'm going to grab a clip, throw it into my source monitor. I'm going to add an in point and an out point. And now I'm going to hit, let's go to the end of my video here in my timeline. I'm going to hit end, and I'm going to hit period to drop that into my timeline. And notice it dropped it on this video and audio track right there. If I change this, you just simply grab and drag like this to audio track 1 or audio track 2 and video track 2 and hit period. Notice it drops it up to that. This will be very helpful for overlays and B-roll editing, and we'll get into that in future episodes as well. Let's show how to do track height here. What you'll usually start off with in a timeline is this kind of generalized track height. And with this track height here, if you want to make these larger, what you can do is you can go in between these little lines here, grab with your mouse and just simply drag up, and it will increase the size of these tracks. And you'll notice it displays thumbnails when you do that, or with audio it will display waveforms, by increasing your track height. Now there's some shortcuts to doing this. You can simply move your mouse over the track over here in this blank area and just scroll up and down. And as you scroll up and down, that will increase the track height and decrease it. So I'm just scrolling down and up, down and up. Notice how that increases it. Now there's a few shortcuts. There's going to be Command, Control, and Shift, or Shift I should say, or Shift plus and minus. And what those do, let's start with Shift actually, then we'll go Control and go Command with the plus and minus. And this is the plus and minus not on your numpad but on the top of your keyboard. So Shift minus, or let's do Shift plus first. Shift plus, that's what it does. It increases your track height and your audio track height to a standard height altogether. It does it all at once. And Shift minus brings them all back down to the standard flattened default height. So Shift plus, Shift minus. See, notice that it goes large and goes small. Now you use Control, Shift plus or minus, and I misspoke a little bit about Control. It's actually Option. It's Shift, Option, and Command. Sorry about the mistake there. So you hold down Option, plus, and look what it does. It increases just all the audio tracks in sync, all the audio track heights, and Option minus decreases all the audio track heights. So Option plus and minus, and now the last one, Command plus and minus, increases track height and not the audio, and decreases it. So Command minus or Control on a PC, and Command minus or Control minus on a PC. So Shift Option Command or Shift Option Control while hitting the plus or minus buttons will have different track height functionality. Okay, in addition to track height here, I'm going to do my Shift plus and get all my track height at the standard height here. I'm going to reassign my tracks for editing there, and I've got all these tracks activated. So what I'm going to do next is show you how to zoom in and out of your timeline. There's this little bar down here you can grab, and you drag this, you grab the end of it here, and you drag this left or right, and it will zoom either in or out of your image, of your timeline here. So if you need to do some fine-tune editing, you can zoom in and work this. I never use this scroll bar, and let me show you why. If you hit just plus or minus on your keyboard, at the top of your keyboard, not on the numpad, it will simply zoom in and zoom out. Plus zooms in, minus zooms out. Now, if you want to see your entire timeline all at once, the slash above your return key, the forward slash, or is that backward slash? I don't know what it is, but it's the one above your return key. If you hit that, it will show your entire timeline all at once. So plus, minus, and slash will show your entire timeline. So pretty simple. What I will usually do before I export is I will hit my slash key just to make sure that I'm not exporting. Sometimes what you'll see is somebody will have some additional footage. They'll put footage way down their timeline like this, and they'll have this clip way down there, and they'll be operating within their timeline here, and they will never know that there's a video clip way down there. Look at this, it's like 10 minutes into my timeline down here, this bonus clip right there. And then when they export it out, it will take a super long time to export this video out because they have this down like 10 minutes, 40 minutes, 30, like an hour down the timeline, and they don't know why it takes so long to export out and why their clips are so large in files, because they've got some clip way down there. So it's good to hit slash, find out if there is an extra clip. I can get rid of that, and now that's my entire timeline. A couple other little basics up here. We'll go through some of these a little bit more advanced features in future episodes, but a couple of little quick things here is the snap tool and your link selection. If you're editing down here and you want to bring one clip close to another one, say I want to bring this clip here and position it right here at the end of my timeline. If you want to do that, notice that as I get this thing close, it locks. It gets kind of within a few frames there, and it locks this clip. That's to help avoid flash frames, because if you're eyeballing this, and this is your snap tool, if your snap tool is turned off, let me turn that off. And the shortcut for this, by the way, is just the S letter on your keyboard. Just hit S, and it turns it on and off. Notice that as I hit it on and off, turn blue and white. Blue is activated. And I try to get this really close here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, and I think that's about good right there, and let go. If you go up here and zoom up to it really close, you'll notice, oops, I couldn't see it when it zoomed out. There's a gap right there. So now when you play, watch this, there's a black gap right there in your video. So if I turn my snap on here, and I grab the clip, notice it will snap either to the playhead or to a close video clip. Look at that, it snaps to it, and boom. Now there's no gap between those two videos, and it also helps you so you don't overwrite video footage by eyeballing it there. So that's what the snap tool is for. Another quick little feature here is your link selection. If you're trying to select a clip and delete a clip, say I want to select this video clip, I want to keep the audio, but I don't want to have the video in here. I hit delete, it deletes both audio and video. It selects the audio that belongs with the video. This link selection, if you turn that off, now notice I can select the video and hit delete, and it leaves my audio there. So that keeps the link selections together if they are already linked when you import them, the audio that belongs to the video. That will unlink the audio and video that belong to each other. This is your timeline settings right here. We're going to go through some of these in future episodes. One thing that maybe I need to point out right now is this is something they've added in the last couple versions of Premiere, showing their through edits. This is kind of nice, because if you have what's called a redundant edit, or what they call through edit here, say we go on this video clip right here and we perform a cut. Command K will perform a cut. Right now I've got my show through edits selected. I've got it on all the time. By default it is not selected in Premiere. And what that does, so what it will look like is this. This edit does not need to be there. If you're playing through, if you forget about this and this edit, you play through it and nothing happens, because this video clip belongs to this video clip. These belong with each other, and I haven't removed any frames in between here. So that is what's called a through edit. you hit your little wrench here and you say show through edits, and it will show if you have any redundant edits. If you're doing color correction, this is really nice to know, because if you add a filter to this and do the color correction, then you basically have to copy and paste that exact filter to this, when this is really all one clip right there. And this shows that that is a redundant edit. It does not need to be there. So I like to have that on pretty much all the time to show when I'm doing redundant edits that don't need to be there. And the way you can get rid of one of those is right click and say join through edits, and it will get rid of that redundant edit and combine the clip back together, and it basically gets rid of any redundant edits. So those are kind of the simple features of the timeline. And lastly, with mentioning timecode, you'll notice this is the running time of your entire timeline right there in frames and seconds. You can change that. And you can also go in and change that. We're going to show how to do that in future episodes if you need to change from timecode. And you can actually change the way that displays if you want. If you can right click on this, you can tell it to show on film. If you're shooting film, to video transfer. If you're showing, and you can show different types of, you can tell it to display by frames. You can tell it how many frames total you have in your timeline. If you want it to do time code, there's a whole bunch of different things. The standard is just telling it to show 23.976 frames per second time code if you're working in 24 frames, or 29.97 drop on non-drop frames. There's some other features up there that you can choose. A couple other little basic things really quick are these little locks here. You can lock each track, so if you're manipulating things and you want something left alone, you can no longer alter this. Now I can select all my audio, or even hit Command A to select everything, delete, and notice it deleted everything outside that track and left that alone. So I'm going to turn that lock off, so that makes it so you cannot change anything on that specific track. The eyeball will turn the track completely off and disable it, so you can no longer see the audio, so you can no longer see the video. Down here in the audio, you have mute that will mute that track. Or if you uncheck that and select solo, it'll play just this track and nothing else. So that's nice if you're just trying to hear one specific track and nothing else. And lastly, the toggle sync track when you're editing. This is a little bit advanced, but when you're editing and you're adding other files on top, you're doing insert editing on top of other tracks, the toggle sync track will turn the sync off of this one. So if you insert edit a clip from here down into video track 2, let me demonstrate. I'm going to hit comma to insert. Notice it moved everything down that was not checkmarked on this toggle sync track. This was turned off here. So it did not. Let me zoom up and show you one more time here. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to drop this track down here. I'm going to assign my audio down to this track and my video up to this track. I'm going to hit comma to insert. Notice it shoved everything on this track down for an insert edit and left this track alone because that toggle sync track is turned off. So if I did that on this track as well, it would have left the audio alone there. Let me undo and show you. So now I hit an insert edit, and that's pretty much an overwrite edit anyway, so that's kind of, I didn't really need to do toggle the sync track. But if you're trying to manipulate one single track and have it leave another one alone, that is the way to do it. And we'll show some examples of that in future episodes when we start to get into editing. Next episode, I will be showing the program window.